Now, this next question is, if it's socialism or barbarism, and America chooses barbarism, then we are going to lose. Okay. Well, you need to understand what Rosa Luxemburg was actually saying with her socialism or barbarism statement. I'm going to read it to you, right? I'm going to read you the context of what she actually wrote, because it wasn't like it was a choice. This is not what she wrote, right? Socialism or barbarism, right? A quote by Rosa Luxemburg. I'm going to pull it up. It's from the Junius pamphlet. The Junius pamphlet was an anti-war pamphlet that Rosa Luxemburg wrote during World War I. She was a German. She was living in Germany, and she was a Marxist, and she was opposed to World War I. And the German Social Democratic Party supported World War I and sold out the workers. So she wrote this theoretical Marxist pamphlet called the Junius pamphlet, this anti-war pamphlet opposing World War I. And it's very well written. It's very poetic, and it's a polemic about the sellout leadership of the labor movement that supported World War I. And that pamphlet is where the quote about socialism or barbarism comes in. So I'm going to read it to you. She wrote, I'll actually read you the 3 paragraphs that it comes from. Socialism is the first popular movement in world history that has set itself the goal of bringing human consciousness and thereby free will into play in the social actions of mankind. That's a heavy statement right there. Socialism is the first movement in history that wants human beings to direct the economy and not have the market and the chaos of the market and nature be in control, but it seeks to put human will into play in the social actions of mankind. For this reason, Friedrich Engels designated the final victory of the socialist proletariat a leap of humanity from the animal world into the realm of freedom. That's in Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. That ultimately, socialism is about realizing our humanity, right? That the animal only interacts with his environment, but man makes the environment serve him. And that socialism is the ultimate triumph of human beings over the environment. Right? It's they get free from scarcity. They're no longer dependent and at the mercy of nature. They have absolute control, and so much abundance is created. There can't be any famines or anything. Socialism is the ultimate freedom of humans from any animalistic existence. This leap is also an iron law of history, bound to the thousands of seeds of prior torment-filled and all too slow development. But this can never be realized until the development of complex material conditions strikes the incendiary spark of consciousness will in the great masses. So meaning that we won't be ready to have socialism until the conditions drive forward the consciousness that enables people to become revolutionary. The victory of socialism will not descend from heaven. It can only be won by a long chain of violent tests of strength between old and new powers. The international proletariat, under the leadership of the Social Democrats, will thereby learn to try and take history into its hands instead of remaining a will-less football. It will take the tiller of social life and become the pilot to the goal of its own history. Right? She's writing that Marxism is essentially working class people figuring out how to insert themselves, how to insert themselves into the political process. So there we go. And so then she goes on. Friedrich Engels once said, bourgeois society stands at the crossroads, either transition to socialism or regression into barbarism. What does regression into barbarism mean for our lofty Europe? Until now, we have all probably read and repeated these words thoughtlessly without suspecting their fearsome seriousness. A look around us at this moment shows what the regression of bourgeois society into barbarism means. This war is a regression into barbarism. The triumph of imperialism leads to the annihilation of civilization. That's heavy. But she's watching World War I. She's watching World War I happen, and the poison gas attacks and the mowing down of people and these battles where hundreds of thousands of people die in a day, like the Battle of the Somme. She's watching this, and she's saying, this is humanity descending into a state of utter barbarism. People are acting like savages. This is a regression. Imperialism is not an advance, but with modern technology, people are acting the most barbaric and savage, pre-civilized ways, right? I got you. I got you. Yeah, I got you. I'll keep that in mind when I answer your question. And she's saying that human civilization, they're acting in the most pre-civilized ways. The triumph of imperialism leads to the annihilation of civilization. She writes, at first this happens sporadically for the duration of a modern war, but then when the period of unlimited war begins, it progresses towards its inevitable consequences. Today, we face the choice exactly as Frederick Engels foresaw it a generation ago. Either the triumph of imperialism and the collapse of all civilization, as in ancient Rome, depopulation, desolation, and degeneration, a great cemetery, or the victory of socialism. That means the conscious active struggle of the international proletariat against imperialism and its method of war. This is a dilemma of world history, and either or, that the scales are wavering before the decision of the class-conscious proletariat. The future of civilization and humanity depends on whether or not the proletariat resolves manfully to throw its revolutionary broadswords into the scales. In this war, imperialism has won. Its bloody sword of genocide has brutally tilted the scale toward the abyss of misery. The only compensation for all the misery and all the shame would be if we learn from the war how the proletariat can seize the mastery of its own destiny and escape the role of lackey to the ruling class. Dearly bought is the modern working class's understanding of its historical vocation. Its emancipation as a class is sown with fearful sacrifices, a veritable path to Golgotha. The June days, the sacrifice of the Commune, the martyrs of the Russian Revolution, a dance of bloody shadows without number. All fell on the field of honor. They are, as Marx wrote about the heroes of the Commune, eternally enshrined in the great heart of the working class. Now millions of proletarians of all tongues fall upon the field of dishonor, fratricide, lacerating themselves while the song of the slave is on their lips. This too we are not spared. We are like the Jews that led Moses through the desert. But we are not lost. We will be victorious if we have not unlearned how to learn. And if the present leaders of the proletariat, the Social Democrats, do not understand how to learn, they will go under to make room for people capable of dealing with a new world. Those are very, very powerful statements from Rosa Luxemburg. And it's from her Junius pamphlet. And she's basically saying that the rise of imperialism, the dominance of finance capital, and the spreading of capitalism all over the world to hold back economic development as the Germans and the British and the Americans and the French and the Austrians are colonizing the world, has ripped away from has ripped away from capitalism and European civilization the mask of civilization. I mean, they're no longer acting like civilized people. And that they're basically being reduced to savages as they gun down whole societies, as they beat down and colonize and exploit people, and that the rise of imperialism stripped away the civilized masks of European civilization, right? And this is something I've reflected on many times. This is an important point, that at the end of the day, right? Feudalism was a bad system, and we don't want to restore feudalism. But in feudalism, everything was dressed up in ritual. In feudalism, everyone had a place. Everyone was born. You were a serf. You were a landowner. You were a soldier. You were a craftsman. Everyone was born into their rank, and there was all this elaborate ritual and ceremony, and the knight and the castle and the king with his divine right to rule, and everything seemed so organized, and it was very unfair. It was very hierarchical. It was very corrupt, but there was this elaborate mystical chivalry that held society together. And Marx, in the Communist Manifesto, talks about how capitalism was the beginning of sweeping that all away. And no more is there any beautiful rank, and no more is there this mystical belief about the king and the commoner, and all that's swept away. It's just about, I want to make money. I want to get rich. What, you're poor? Well, you work for me. You work for me, I give you this wage. And that capitalism makes it just about callous cash payment. And if the employer has no obligation to his employees other than to pay them the wages, and the employee can't expect anything from the employer except the little that he can get away with, and this is the beginning of it. But then Rosa Luxemburg, in that passage we just read, she's describing how as capitalism moves into its monopoly stage of imperialism that Lenin wrote about, it's becoming even less civilized, right? And they're mobilizing workers to slaughter whole villages, to hold back economic development in the countries that they are colonizing, and to form blocks of countries, Germany and Austria blocking against the British and the Americans and the French, and to hate each other on the basis of nationality, and to go out and die by the millions. 20 million workers died in World War I, 20 million people. And the poison gas, the chemical weapons, right? And all of that all of the mask of civilization was being pulled off of Europe, and Europe was turned into just a giant battlefield of senseless killing. And Rosa Luxemburg is comparing this to the fall of the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire was awful, obviously, but what replaced the Roman Empire? Something worse. Life expectancy across Europe went down. Europe depopulated. It took 1,100 years for Europe to maintain the population level it had had at the height of the Roman Empire. The height of human beings decreased after the fall of the Roman Empire. Nutrition intake decreased. And the Roman Empire was bad, but it was replaced by chaos, barbarism, where you had less and less stability. And less and less stability and less productivity. And you got, someone says 100,000 years of darkness. You had a dark age. The reason they called it the dark age was because they were not at the productive level that Europe had been at the time of the Roman Empire. And all the science and all the advances in technology that had taken place under the Roman Empire were rolled backwards. It was a great regression. The Middle Ages were a great regression for Europe. And she's basically saying that right now, the question isn't, do we have socialism or capitalism? The question is, will capitalism in Europe lead to something like the fall of the Roman Empire? Will this savagery of imperialism lead to Europe breaking down into a state of barbarism? Right? That is what she's writing about. And what's interesting is that she is saying the exact opposite of what Friedrich Nietzsche is saying. Friedrich Nietzsche says that that's good. He says that Europe is losing all of the Christianity that was just a revolt of the weak against the strong. It's losing all of the laws that are made to restrain the great men from their greatness. Nietzsche writes about what he calls the blonde beast, the white man who is going into the third world and being a savage and slaughtering black and brown people and robbing them and killing them. And he says this is great because we're getting back to might is right. We're getting back to a society that worships strength, that doesn't believe in these moral pretenses that are imposed by the weak to restrain the strong. So what Nietzsche liked with the rise of colonialism, the increasingly moving toward the law of the jungle, what Nietzsche liked, Rosa Luxemburg sees as the seeds of civilization falling apart. And this is fascinating stuff. With the rise of imperialism, we see an end of morality, right? And this is a point I've made many, many times. But on the wall of the U.S. Department of Justice, there is a phrase that is written. And I remember when I worked in D.C., I would walk by the Department of Justice on my way to my office. And on the wall, I would read the words, "Where the law stops, tyranny begins." Now think about where law stops, tyranny begins. What does that mean? Right? We're Marxists, right? We hate the courts because they oppress poor people. We're mad at the police, so we can't agree with that. Well, actually, you can. Right? Where law stops, tyranny begins. Law and morality are the only two things that prevent the strong from completely ruling over the weak. Without law and without morality, it just becomes the law of the jungle. The strongest survive, right? Law and morality are the only mechanisms that our society has to protect the weak from the strong. And unfortunately, our laws tend to be written by the strong, so they're not exactly fair. And we don't pretend that there's equal justice under the law or any of that. We know we live in a hierarchical society. But when you get rid of law entirely, when you get rid of morality entirely, you get the law of the jungle, where just the strongest survive. Right? Whoever has the gold makes the rules. Whoever's got the biggest gun, whoever's the strongest, can do whatever they want. And what we saw with the rise of imperialism was that European society was degenerating into the law of the jungle. We're the British. We can come to India and we can burn all your textile looms and force you to import your cloth from Britain. What are you going to do about it? We got a bigger gun. We control the world economy. Oh, you want to fight about it? We'll just slaughter whole villages and kill you all. There's no moral pretense there. There's no moral justification for acting that way, but they do it because it's the law of the jungle. Might is right. Right? The employer says to the worker, hey, I'll pay you 2 cents an hour. The employee says, but I can't work for 2 cents an hour. And he says, oh, well, then I just won't hire you. I'll hire somebody else who will work for 2 cents an hour. What? You got a problem about that? What are you going to do? I own the company. You don't. Screw you. There's no moral pretense there. It's just the law of the jungle, right? And that capitalism, and especially as capitalism developed into imperialism, it started stripping away any moralistic pretense, stripping away any legal pretense, and degenerating into a form of barbarism, where the guys with the biggest guns and the guys with the gold made the rules, and they didn't pretend to be moral, and they didn't pretend to write a legal code and set up courts, and they didn't pretend any of that, right? And that imperialism, even though it was centralizing wealth in the hands of a lot of European corporations and multinationals, it was leading European civilization to come apart. And we're seeing this now in the United States. During World War II, there were a lot of American capitalists who loved Hitler, right? Henry Ford had gotten the Iron Cross from Hitler and gotten a medal from Hitler. And, a lot of American capitalists loved Hitler. And thank you, Kurt, for your super chat. But after World War II started, after Pearl Harbor happened, they understood, all right, we're at war with the Germans. So it doesn't matter if we personally like Hitler. We have to support our country. And they were forced to organize production for war. And there were exceptions to this. IBM was still running the punch card machine for the Holocaust. There's a great book exposing that, IBM and the Holocaust. But, Walt Disney was a Nazi sympathizer. But then when World War II started, he started making propaganda films against the Nazis. Why? Because he was loyal to the United States. He was, there was this understanding among the wealthiest capitalists that you might have one opinion, but at the end of the day, your financial interest in the short term might be more in line with the Nazis or whatever. But, you have this obligation to be loyal to the homeland, to be loyal to the country, to fight the Nazis. Well, we don't have that no more. Right? I mean, we don't have that anymore. Increasingly, the capitalists say, I got my own interest. Why do I have any obligation? Right? And increasingly, we see things all throughout U.S. society that look more and more like the law of the jungle, where even among the capitalists, they just do whatever they want. They just do whatever is convenient for them. Right? There's a big division in the ruling class about Russia. There's a big division in the ruling class about China. Obama negotiated the Iran nuclear deal. He made a deal in the name of the United States because he thought it would strategically benefit the United States. But Donald Trump, he got in there and he said, well, it might benefit Obama's friends, doesn't benefit me. And he ripped up the Iran nuclear deal. He erased it. That wouldn't have happened 30 or 40 years ago because they would have understood we have one national interest, right? They were loyal to this notion of America, this collective notion of advancing the country. They don't feel that way anymore. Right? And increasingly, we see the polarization between red states and blue states. We look at January 6th. The United States is deteriorating more and more into barbarism. More and more into barbarism because even the the morality or law that held U.S. society together, it gets in the way of might is right. Every capitalist is looking out for his own interest. Every region is looking out for itself. And we're seeing this overall deterioration, that all the pretenses are being stripped away. And this is what she was talking about. And as Rome was falling apart, they used to joke, at one, the Roman Empire divided into two, and then it divided again. And after a while, they joked that all you needed to be a Roman emperor was to have your face on a coin. Anyone in Europe could put their face on a coin and say, I'm the emperor of Rome. And they'd have two or three, some local area would recognize them. That increasingly the Roman Empire just came apart because different interests pulled it one way, pulled it another way. And in Rome, at the end of the Roman Empire, they were fighting what they called the barbarians, or the barbarians. And who were the barbarians? They were Germans, right? They were the Germans, the various German tribes, Goths and Huns, and what were they? Goths and Ostrogoths and Visigoths and Huns and Vandals. They were fighting them. But it got to the point that Rome couldn't even put its own army together, right? Rome was, whole story of the Roman Empire was a military city-state. They were really good at having a military. But towards the end, the Roman emperor would get out there and he would say, guys, we need to go fight the barbarians. And the Romans would say, screw you. I'm not going to go get killed to fight no barbarians. No, I got an orgy to go to. I got a party to go to. I got some drinking to do. So the Romans couldn't even raise their own army. They didn't have enough centralization, enough coherence within the Roman city-state to actually raise their own army. So they ended up having to hire other Germans to fight the German tribes they were fighting. And at the end, Rome didn't even have its own army. It didn't have its own army. It had to hire other people throughout its empire, kind of like what the United States is doing now with green card soldiers. Have you looked at that? Increasingly, U.S. soldiers are not from the United States. They're people from South America that we want to give visas to. Because if you ask average American kids, hey, do you want to go fight for America? They go, screw you. I'm not fighting for Joe Biden. I'm not fighting for Trump. And increasingly, the United States is having to find people from South America to say, we'll give you a green card if you fight for America, because we don't have a central vision. We don't have a central vision anymore. U.S. society is crumbling internally, right? And on the one hand, it's good to see the mythology and the nationalism that held U.S. society together coming apart. But on the other hand, if it's not going to lead to something better, if it's just going to lead to barbarism, that's not good either. Right? We need to replace the United States as it currently exists with a higher plane. We need socialism with American characteristics. The USA needs to be reborn on socialist principles. But if it doesn't, it's just going to further deteriorate. And it's going to go the way of Rome. And we're going to depopulate here in the United States. We're already depopulating. Living standards are going down. Life expectancy is going down, right? We're already depopulating, and, it will balkanize and we'll just deteriorate further into barbarism. And this is the natural conclusion of imperialism. The global system of imperialism, capitalism in its monopoly stage, leads to the degeneration of societies into barbarism. And that's what Rosa Luxemburg is saying in her historic statement. So it's not like we have a choice individually. It's that ultimately, the capitalist crisis in the center of the empire is going to either lead to further degeneration into barbarism and the breaking up of the United States and Europe, or it will lead to the rise of socialism. And I think there's a very good chance we could see the rise of socialism because of China, and because of Russia, and because of Venezuela, and because of Iran, and because of Cuba. There is already an anti-imperialist bloc of countries that don't have capitalism. And so the United States breaking up into barbarism would mean that not only would our economy have to continue to degenerate, but then somehow we would have to be blocked from joining the economy that is growing. The Chinese economy is growing. The Russian economy is growing. The economy of the Bolivarian countries is growing. The BRICS are growing. And it would be in the economic interest of much of the American capitalist class not to allow the country to further deteriorate, but instead to simply have the United States transition into joining the Belt and Road, joining the Eurasian Economic Union, and being part of the new alternative global economic order. So that's my hope. However, that would get in the way of the power of the big monopolies. And this is the issue. The big monopolies, right? The big oil bankers, the big oil corporations, the big banks, the Silicon Valley elites, they don't want that new economy. They don't care about the United States degenerating into barbarism. They don't care about Europe degenerating into barbarism as long as they can stay the global middleman. They don't want the world to continue developing because they don't build things. They don't build roads. They don't build highways. They don't build steel. They don't manufacture things. All they do is they are the middleman, and they lend money, and people buy their oil from them, and everyone continues to get poorer, and they continue soaking in the profits. So they don't care if the United States continues to deteriorate into barbarism. They don't care. So the United States breaking out of the decaying imperialist system would require the United States breaking out of imperialism. It would require a block of people in the United States. It would be a lot of working class people who are tired of seeing their wages go down, tired of seeing instability in their communities, who want better jobs and healthcare and education for their kids and for their communities. And it would probably include a lot of capitalists in America, store owners, industrialists, others who want the economy of the USA to be strong and want a government that is investing in the country and stabilizing the economy. And it would involve that alternative economy, Russia and China and Venezuela, and the alternative economy that's emerging that is based on economic growth. And it would involve a block emerging within U.S. society to beat back the imperialists, the big monopolies. Right? And that's what would ultimately have to happen. Just like in China, they kicked out the imperialists with a block of 4 classes, right? On the Chinese flag, you have the big star, and that's the Chinese Communist Party. And then it's representing 4 smaller stars. That's the block of 4 classes: the peasantry, the workers, the middle class, and the national capitalist class, all led by the Communist Party with its proletarian ideology. Right? You had to have an anti-imperialist block of 4 classes. Well, if we're going to defeat the imperialists and prevent the United States from degenerating further into barbarism, we need a block of different classes. We need the working class. We need the small business owners. We need the industrialists. There's going to be a different layers of U.S. society that have an economic interest in seeing America prosper as a country, because the imperialists at this point don't have an economic interest in seeing the United States prosper. The poorer the United States gets, the richer they are, because they're based in this global free trade system. They are the global middleman in trade. They are not concerned about the United States getting wealthier. They are concerned about maintaining their global monopoly. So if a solid anti-imperialist bloc were to emerge within the United States that was aligned with the anti-imperialist countries, had the working class and the labor movement at the center of it, people like Chris Smalls fighting the giant monopoly of Amazon, right? If the bloc were to form, and that bloc took power in Washington, D.C. and was elected or was able to take power and started nationalizing the banks and nationalizing the oil companies and restructuring the economy so that it benefited the working class of America and was friendly and doing business with Russia and China and Venezuela and the anti-imperialist bloc of countries, that would benefit the United States, and it would end the dissension into barbarism. However, if the imperialists continue to rule the United States, if the Silicon Valley fascists and the big oil bankers and the intelligence apparatus and those forces continue to dominate the United States, we will see a further degeneration into barbarism, because that is not a problem for them. Right. And this is what Rosa Luxemburg was getting at. And I'm glad somebody asked about it, because I was getting canceled and attacked on Twitter earlier today for saying we need an anti-imperialist bloc to beat back the power of the big monopolies. And this is what we ultimately need, right? That we are in a period where imperialist homelands like the United States, like Britain, like France, like Germany are deteriorating into barbarism. Britain is ready to balkanize. Scotland's going to break away. Wales might break away. I mean, Britain is falling apart, right? The United States is falling apart. The Western imperialist homelands are coming apart because the imperialists are loyal to their global system of trade. They're not loyal to the homeland. But the economic interest of the homeland is with the global economy. And this is what I'm getting at. And this is what we have to stand for. And this is what 21st century socialism is about. And this is what socialism around the world is about. Now, the Western left are just people being programmed and manipulated by the algorithms to be the hit squad of the big monopolies, to kind of kick around the domestic capitalists, keep them in line. So that's different. But I'm glad you asked me about the Rosa Luxemburg and the piece about socialism or barbarism, because ultimately she was very much foreseeing the circumstances that we are currently living under and that I am constantly talking about. So there you go.